Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Maybe a little bit tired already, but 2 more sessions to go. In this session, I'd like to share with you what is going on in Japan, in the financial industry, and how the banks and the securities houses in Japan is using AWS. My name is Tetsuo Iida. I'm a business development manager for financial services in Japan. I hope any information today will be any help for the Korean financial industry to start using the cloud. Today's agenda, first I'd like to talk about up-to-date information of how the Japanese financial institutions are using cloud and what is driving the financial institutions to adopt cloud from the market driver point of view and the regulatory point of view. And then I'd like to go through the cloud journey of the Japanese financial institutions. Where we are today. Maybe some of you might have seen this news. This is news from Japan. But MUFG is the biggest financial institution in Japan and also one of the G6 institutions operating globally across 50 countries. And MUFG is doing the business not only in banking, but securities, credit card, asset management, custody, and leasing. And January 23rd of this year, the Nikkei, the business newspaper, picked up this information. The MUFG started or contracted with Amazon in using the cloud. And what is said in the newspaper? The Nikkei, it is said that bank could reduce $100 million in 5 years, and the bank is now thinking about standardize its IT infrastructure with AWS. It's not only for the bank, but group-wide implementation they are thinking. And they said they can get agility for fintech by using the cloud. What is important is that it is not AWS that is saying this. It is the bank management is talking to the media. Another news picked up by online media, IT Pro. The bank management says that the core banking system is not exception in moving to the cloud. And they plan to move 500 systems out of 1,000 to the cloud in the next 10 years. And AWS was the first choice for the bank because of its rich functionality and cost efficiency. Apart from the Bank of Tokyo Mitsibishi, MUFG, I like to see how the cloud is used in each segment of the Japanese financial industry. I segmented into 3 plus fintech. The tier 1 is mega bank group like MUFG. Others would be Mizuho, SMBC, Nomura, and Daiwa. And in tier 2, I put the branch-based, the traditional financial institutions, and also the internet-only banks and securities companies. They are getting relatively bigger and now categorized as a tier 2 in terms of its asset size. And tier 3 is regional banks. And apart from these, there is fintech companies. The color in red is now using the cloud. It started from the startups. It's around 2012. We observed the fintech company coming into the market, taking the market share from the bigger players. And all the fintech startups are using cloud, and most of them are on AWS today. And after fintech companies who started using the cloud around 2014 are internet-only banks and securities companies like Sony Bank, Japan Net Bank, SBI Securities, and Manex Securities. At that point, regulation was minimum, not well defined, but they challenged using cloud from around 2014. But it is around the same year that top-tier banks like MUFG started considering using the cloud. It took a long time to evaluate the securities of the cloud, but from last year, as we saw in the newspaper, the mega financial institutions have actually using the cloud and started migrating their workload to AWS or other cloud services. So what we can observe here is that skipping some tiers, but from the internet-only banks and securities houses, now the top-tier institutions are seriously considering the cloud services. What is driving the market? The first is the market environment. The market environment around financial institutions is very tough today. The interest rate is very low, or in Japan, it is minus. So it is not easy for the financial institutions to earn revenue. Then it is a cost pressure for the financial institutions. That is one of the drivers to start using the cloud. And also their peers, meaning the global US or the UK financial institutions, are actively using the fintech companies and also the cloud services. So under the pressure, peer pressure from the global banks, the top-tier Japanese financial institutions started considering using the cloud. And another driver is the Fintech Evolution. From around about 1 or 2 years ago, the many financial institutions started considering collaboration with the fintech companies, or sometimes they need to compete against fintech companies. But for fintech companies, cloud is a norm. All the financial institutions, all the startup companies are using the cloud to make disruptive businesses. This is another driver. And third driver comes from the regulatory regulations. The AWS continuously had a conversation with FSA or the FISC, the guideline setters, to let them understand more about security of the cloud. And also for the government, supporting fintech is a strategy to make the financial market more active. I'd like to go a little bit further into fintech and regulation. The AWS is used by many fintech companies. In Japan, we have around 150 to 200 fintech companies, and most of them are using AWS. The important point is some of the business categories like payments, lending, asset management, and insurance, these categories are the regulated businesses, even for fintech companies. So they need to get registration or approval from the regulators. But as you know, the fintech companies normally do not use any on-premise systems. They put everything on the cloud. Even the transaction data or the personal information data is on the cloud. How can it be allowed? The first thing is that the fintech is now a national strategy to make the market more active compared to other financial centers. So the FSA is trying to enhance its support for the fintech startups by setting up the support desks for fintech companies. And also, the regulator is changing the Banking Act so that the banks can make direct investment into the fintech companies. And also, the fintech is now the top agenda for the financial institutions. They try to collaborate with them. They set up acceleration programs, where they do make the direct investment into fintech companies. And also, they are trying to make a kind of ecosystem to get directly systematically connected to the fintech companies through APIs. And for the fintech companies, because the cloud is a norm, regulators and financial institutions have to find a way to use the cloud to make the financial institutions and also the market competitive enough. Now I'd like to talk about a little bit about the guideline, how it is evolving around the fintech. The FISC, this is a public interest incorporated foundation. This is a kind of industry body that consists of over 600 member institutions across financial industry. And they said, or they issued the fiscal security guideline. This includes a list of over 300 guideline items that is covering facility, operation, and infrastructure management. Even though this is an industry body, what is important is that FSA examiners use this guideline as a reference when they examine the IT systems of the financial institutions. And how it evolved in the last 5 years, the current version is version 8 revision 2. And this version have a detailed checklist about using the cloud. So now, today, the financial institution can use this version 8 revision 2 to make sure that banks are compliant with the regulation when they use the cloud. But when it was initially issued, the version 8 was issued in 2011, it didn't have anything about cloud. And what AWS did was, even though there was nothing saying about cloud in the version 8, the AWS tried to create a kind of reference guide how the AWS can be mapped to the guideline from the FISC. And every time the FISC guideline is updated, AWS also updated our reference. And because of those contributions, the FISC committee, when FISC committee is organized, AWS is commissioned to participate in the committees like Cloud Committee, or currently the Fintech Committee is running. And AWS Japan is a member of these committees. Once these committees come to the conclusion, the result will be reflected to the next version of FISC guideline. This is how AWS is influencing the guideline of the financial industry. So the contribution to the FISC committee, AWS was a member of Cloud Committee in 2014, and currently Fintech Committee. And AWS issued the reference for the FISC security guideline. This provides the mapping between FISC guideline and AWS security information. And in order to make this reference, we collaborated with system integration companies, initially 3 and currently 9 system integration companies are supporting AWS to create this reference guide. Okay, how the guideline to evolve? I think the basis of the guideline is changing. The former version, like version 8 of FISC guideline, is based on the concept that the bank owns their own data center. And the current version of FISC guideline has the detailed definition of the cloud. So now the cloud is accepted a kind of an option, but still an option. But for the future guideline, I believe that cloud will be a common infrastructure. So that it's going to be the basis for the system infrastructure for the banks and securities companies in the future. And I mentioned that currently AWS is a member of Fintech Committee, and the Fintech Committee is now disclosing its minutes of the discussion. And I picked up a couple of things from the discussions today. Initially, the reason why the FISC is trying to redefine its guideline is, first, they like to give more clarity to the cloud guideline because some financial institutions are still hesitant in using the cloud. So give more clarity to the guideline. And FISC also says that we should refer to other countries like US and UK and what other regulators are saying about cloud. And also the new discussion, the current discussion says that the security control should be based on the responsibility boundary. This means that the financial institutions should know what responsibility they need to take. And also they should understand what responsibility the cloud provider are going to be taking. Then based on that understanding, the financial institution can utilize cloud like AWS further. And also the current discussion says that the financial institutions should have access to the cloud provider's business location, but this does not necessarily mean the data centers. You may know the AWS do not disclose the exact location of data centers because of security. But a new guideline would be saying that it is not necessarily needed to go to the data center because it is not effective to go to the data center. You cannot know anything by going there. A couple of information regarding the other countries. FCA is a UK regulator, and they issued a kind of consultation paper in 2015, and it does say they see no fundamental reason why cloud services, including public cloud services, cannot be implemented. So they are pushing the cloud to be used by the financial institutions. And MAS, this is a Singaporean regulator, also give us some positive comment regarding the cloud services. Okay, to the future, the cloud journey of Japanese FSIs. I'd like to pick up Sony Bank as a case study here. The Sony Bank is an internet-only bank established in 2001, and it is owned by Sony Financial Holdings. It is a subsidiary of Sony Corporation. And it is internet-only bank, but it does provide the full banking services, including the deposit, lending, credit card, investment products. And they already have 1 million consumer accounts. What they have done so far, so this is a diagram of how the Sony Bank is using AWS. From this picture, you can see that almost all the systems except core banking system is already on the cloud. It's a website, office applications, banking application like accounting or risk control systems, and the development environment, all on the cloud, all on AWS. But it took time to come to this state. Originally, they started the migration or evaluation of the AWS securities in 2013. And after that, they defined the cloud guideline. So security checking and cloud guideline took them 9 months. And once security checking and guideline is completed, the Sony Bank started the migration of the systems. And during the evaluation process, they moved the first project, they moved the first workload to the cloud. What is important in this slide is that they have already went through 2 to 3 financial years. This means that they have already got internal auditing, external auditing, and also had interviews with FSAs, but they had no problem in using the cloud for the critical applications. So originally, when Sony Bank decided to use AWS, they wanted to use the cutting-edge technology to produce creative services for customers. And because of its richness in functionality and cost efficiency, Sony Bank chose AWS. And they have already realized the 37% cost reduction, and they say that it's going to be achieved in 5 years. But they say in their presentation that it is being achieved. And they got flexibility in IT procurement and agility. This is more generic version of cloud journey. this is Japanese financial institutions, but this could be applied to all the financial institutions. It does start from understanding of AWS. And as we saw in the Sony Bank case study, the security checking is very, very important for the financial institutions because financial institutions, the compliance is very, very important. And once the security evaluation is complete, you could run the POC or the first project. And during the first project, you should define the AWS guideline. It is not only the migration, also the operation processes and maintenance process need to be defined in this guideline. Then migration strategy, and based on this migration strategy, the mass migration, the migration of all the systems to start. But it could start from just lift and shift, just moving the system to the cloud. Then once more maturity comes, you could create more cloud-native applications on AWS to make the most of the cloud services. So the Sony Bank is, I think, now moving to this cloud-native application development phase. And MUFG, which I introduced earlier in this presentation, is now in this migration phase. That is why the management people of MUFG started talking to the media about their project. But still, we have challenges. We lack the cloud specialists in the market. After MUFG started talking to the media, we are getting a lot of inquiries from customers, but they have problem in getting the cloud specialists within their organization and also the system integration vendor who supports them. And the second issue is the legacy applications. Even though these financial institutions start migrating their systems, it is easy if it is built on the open platform. But if it is built on the mainframe computer, the re-architecting or re-engineering of the application is necessary to be migrated to the cloud. And formality culture in the Japanese banking industry, they do just checking the checklist. That is blocking the financial institutions to make their own decision. But now the regulator is now moving from formality to effectiveness. So the AWS, we try to support or try to challenge these problems with our customers. In summary, it's just beginning. But as we saw today's presentation, one of the biggest financial institutions in Japan is already started migrating their workloads to the cloud. And regulatory environment in Japan is now changing to pro-cloud. And the cloud is a norm for the fintech companies and also new businesses of financial institutions today. And early adopters like Sony Bank have already realized the benefits and challenges ahead for the acceleration, but AWS will try to remove these challenges with our customers. I hope the information today is useful for you, and if Japan and Korea could share the knowledge about cloud and promote the cloud adoption further, I'm very happy. Thank you very much.